Welcome to our midweek reflection on issues we wrestle with, and today we're thinking about genocide, a really difficult issue for us to address or understand or respond to positively. Our reading today comes from the book of Esther. It's quite a short book in the Old Testament, and do read the whole of it when you have a chance, but we're just going to read chapter 3 today. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and did obeisance to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or do obeisance. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" When they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman, in order to see whether Mordecai's words would avail, for he told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or do obeisance to him, Haman was infuriated. But he thought it beneath him to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So, having been told who Mordecai's people were, Haman plotted to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, which means the lot, before Haman for the day and for the month. And the lot fell on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered and separated among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it isn't appropriate for the king to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued for their destruction, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, so that they may put it into the king's treasuries." So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. The king said to Haman, "The money is given to you, and the people as well, to do with them as it seems good to you." Then the king's secretaries were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict according to all that Haman commanded was written to the king's satraps and to the governors over all the provinces and to the officials of all the peoples, to every province in its own script and every people in its own language. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces, giving orders to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation, calling on all the peoples to be ready for that day. The couriers went quickly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. It's a terrifying story, isn't it? A powerful man finds his propaganda is not believed or connived at by a particular individual from a particular ethnic group, and his pride is wounded. He begins to feel anger and resentment towards this person, this group, who look a bit different, sound a bit different, eat different foods. He creates a political campaign which is based around discrediting these people, and he says to those in power, it really isn't in your best interests to tolerate these people. Now, in the case of Haman, he's very direct. He asks the king for permission to wipe the Jews out altogether. Genocide does sometimes look like that. The Rwandan genocide, in which during the course of a couple of months in 1994, about 800,000 Tutsi were murdered, hacked to death or burnt alive by Hutu gangs. Most of the people who died were murdered not by militias or soldiers or police, but by their own neighbours, because fear had been heated up until it became anger and hatred. During the Biafran War, over 2 years, the Igbo people were systematically and deliberately starved by the Hausa and Yoruba people of northern Nigeria. Over 1 million, perhaps 2 million died. The numbers are hard to pin down. Or think of the ethnic cleansing massacres of Srebrenica, or the gas chambers of Treblinka or Auschwitz. Genocide can put on a very deliberate and unapologetic face. Once the systematic killing starts, who's brave enough to stand against it? But as we know, most genocides don't start out as a call to murderous annihilation of your next door neighbour, even though that is where they end. They start with people being asked to carry particular forms of identification, or told to live in particular areas, to sit on particular park benches, or not to sit on particular bus seats. You might not get all the way to a genocide. Instead, you might just have apartheid, where people considered inferior or considered to be a threat are enslaved and deprived of education or housing or healthcare or all of those things. Or you might have a situation like the one in Northern Ireland, where the division is sectarian and you are excluded from jobs and denied accommodation by landlords, and there are bombs going off in your shopping centres, and there are troops and tanks on your streets. Where does all this violence and cruelty come from? It can come from fear or insecurity or jealousy, or just from an observation of profound difference. These people don't look like me. Their hair is too curly, their noses are too big, their skin is too dark, their food smells peculiar, they speak an odd language. They worship gods that don't look like the gods I worship. People can be told all sorts of lies about one another. People have been told for centuries that Christians eat human sacrifices. People have been told for centuries that Jews have horns on their heads. And I probably only have to say the word Islamic to conjure up a whole raft of terrifying stereotypes, starting with the oppression of women and running up to and including the beheading of journalists. What is our response to all this as Christians? I mean, if only we could say with our hands on our hearts that no Christian person had ever been actively involved in an act of genocide or actively involved in perpetuating apartheid or sectarian division, but tragically we just can't say that. The history of Germany and Kosovo tell us a story we'd honestly rather not read. In the book of Esther, the slaughter is avoided only by an act of great courage and faith. As Esther relinquishes her queenly privileges to stand up for her people and does so at the risk of her own life. Interestingly, the book of Esther doesn't once mention God. Rather, it shows the action of God through the faithful and courageous action of those who love him. And we, in what may feel like a rather godless society, are called to show the same courage and faith in understanding what is going on around us and acting to prevent catastrophes. What should our Christian response be? Not just to genocide when it happens, as it seems to be happening right now, today, in Tigray in Nigeria, but to the tiny seeds of exclusion, disdain, fear, othering, from which these terrible hatreds and crimes grow. The book of Genesis tells us that God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. Each of us is made in God's image. Each of us has been given the gift of life by God. Each of us has been created by the God who also made the wonderful variety of creation. We were created to be diverse. Jesus teaches us that we are to love our diverse neighbours as we love ourselves. Well, that means exactly what it says on the tin. We're to love each person. I don't know about you, but I find it really hard to love people I don't know. I can wish them well in a vague sort of way, but if I don't know them or know something of their situation, it can be hard to love them. It's always easier to feel love or compassion for someone if you've walked a mile in their shoes, or at least know where it is they're trying to walk to. A few years ago, I found myself spending time with some refugees of a faith and from a country about which I knew nothing at all. And I was sorry for them, but I was also a little bit scared. I was scared of offending them. I was scared of who they might really be and what they might really be like. And I had to work quite hard at getting to know them and making friends with them. And I did come to hold them very close to my heart. Perhaps you've had a similar experience. And I'm not just talking about foreigners. It's about anyone whose way of life seems alien to you or to me. Perhaps for some of us, that's our LGBT community, or refugees from Syria or Afghanistan, or the travelling community, or perhaps it's the many young men in our prison population who have mental health issues. Perhaps it's our rough sleepers. I don't know. But here's my invitation to you. Consider, do you love these people as you love yourself? Do you even know any of these people? I'm inviting you to find out about a group of people who honestly worry you a little bit. Try to find information that has been produced by them, not just about them. If you can, try to get to know them. Maybe you'll volunteer as a prison visitor. Maybe you'll strike up a new conversation with someone you don't know at the school gate. Maybe you'll binge watch a whole series about their history on Netflix. I don't know. But let it be their voices you hear. Not the voices of others talking about them, but their own testimonies, their own stories. Get to know them and to see them as made in God's image. Genocide is a terrible, unbearable stain on human history, but it's just the final awful flowering of many things which can easily take root in our communities and which we must be vigilant and intentional about rooting out. Fear, scorn, tribalism, insecurity, disdain. When we know that we and our neighbours are made in God's image, fully loved, fully valued, fully known, when we take time to know and love them, we disarm the evil and we restore the good. We all have the capacity to act for the good by God's grace. So let's do what we can, because the time to prevent tomorrow's genocides is today.